Late. I bent for a dropped file, my hand brushing the trash can. I saw his hand first. Chapped. Shaking. Covertly wiping a dried bloodstain from the leg of my desk. "You should be more careful," he rasped. Then, a gold ring slipped from his loose glove and rolled to my shoe. The engraved Q stared up at me, my family signet. I looked up. Those blue-gray eyes. My grandfather. "My name is Mara Quinn. I am 29 years old, and I am the lead data investigator for Varon and Vale Logistics. My office is on the 47th floor of the V&V Tower, a spike of smoked glass and pressurized steel that punctures the perpetually bruised sky of Grayford. This is a city of high finance and low-hanging clouds, a place that smells of rain, ozone, and wet concrete." The digital clock on my terminal flickered. 10:41 p.m. I was alone, or as alone as you can be in a building designed to watch itself. The 47th floor was a ghost town, a vast, open-plan morgue of ergonomic chairs and dark monitors. The only light, apart from the acid-green glow of my own screen, came from the motion sensors. They snapped on, one by one, as I moved, illuminating my path in pools of harsh, sterile white, only to click off behind me, plunging the desks back into shadow. They felt less like a convenience and more like an escort, or a guard. The silence was thick, broken only by the rhythmic hiss-thump of the industrial air conditioning. It scrubbed the air clean, leaving behind a faint, cold smell of metal and ammonia. It was the scent of erasure. My fingers ached. Stiff from typing, on my screen, 3 columns of numbers refused to reconcile. I was deep in the substation logs for facilities management, a digital rabbit hole I'd been falling down for 3 weeks. I was tracking a ghost, a recurring, anomalous sanitation fee charged by an outside vendor, not a monthly retainer, a single, precise transaction. It posted every Wednesday, at 2:03 a.m. To an analyst, that's not a typo, that's a signature. It's a flag waving from a sinking ship. The vendor was Haven Sanitation, a company with a paper-thin incorporation history and an address that led to a mailbox depot in the industrial flats. The payments were small enough to fly under the automated audit radar, but consistent. They were rats in the digital walls. I leaned back, rubbing the bridge of my nose, and my elbow knocked my stylus to the floor. It rolled under the desk. "Damn." I sighed, swiveled my chair, and bent down, feeling the tight pull in my shoulders. My hand fumbled in the darkness, brushing against the smooth, cold chrome leg of the desk, and that's when I saw it. It was just a smear, a tiny, rust-colored flake, dried in the groove where the leg met the pedestal. I'd thought I'd cleaned it all. My stomach tightened. The stain wasn't from the stylus. It was from 4:17 p.m. It was my blood. The memory was sharp, cold, and humiliating. Sloane, my stepmother, our COO, she had glided into my workspace, a vision in charcoal gray silk, smelling faintly of citrus and power. She didn't knock. She didn't have to. "Mara, darling," she'd said, her voice a soft, melodic purr that always set my teeth on edge. She'd placed a tablet on my desk. "Your third-quarter projections are sentimental. You're allocating fuel expenditure based on predictive weather modeling, not contracted freight rates." "The models are 90% accurate, Sloane," I'd said, keeping my voice flat. "It's more efficient. It saves us nothing," she'd hissed. The purr was gone. "It creates variables. We don't do variables." She'd leaned in, her smile a perfect red slash. "We do certainty." I stood my ground. "The Haven Sanitation contract isn't certain. It's a leak. I can't find a service manifest that matches their invoices." The change was terrifying. Her smile didn't fade, but it froze. She moved. Faster than I'd anticipated. She didn't slap me. Sloane was too polished for that. She gripped my chin, her fingers digging in, her sharp, modern rings pressing hard against the bone. Her face was inches from mine. "You are a data clerk. Mara," she whispered, the words precise and cold. A very, very good one. Find the numbers I ask for. Cross-reference the manifests I provide. Do not dig. She'd released me with a shove. Her ring had split the skin on my chin. Just a pinprick. A single, dark drop of blood had welled up. She'd looked at it. Her expression one of faint disgust, as if I'd spilled coffee. "Clean yourself up," she'd ordered, turning and gliding away. "You look messy." A drop had fallen onto the desk leg as I stood there, shaking with a cold, precise rage. Now, hours later, in the oppressive silence, I heard a new sound. Squeak, squeak, thump. I froze. I hadn't triggered the lights in the main corridor. Someone else was here. A man, a janitor. He was pushing a large, industrial yellow mop bucket on wheels. He wore the standard gray V&V uniform, but he was new. I'd never seen him. A faded blue baseball cap was pulled low, obscuring his face in shadow. He moved with a strange, quiet efficiency. He didn't whistle. He didn't shuffle. His movements were economical, measured. He stopped at my workstation. I sat up, wary. "Evening." He just nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. He bent down and pulled the trash liner from my bin. My breath caught. My shredded notes on the Haven contract were in there. Stupid. I should have used the secure disposal. But he didn't just tie the bag. He did something I'd never seen a cleaner do. He took my full, translucent bag and, instead of tossing it into the large hopper on his cart, he placed it carefully into a separate, opaque black bag, a clean swap. Then, from a roll on the side of his cart, he pulled a fresh liner. He snapped it open with a sharp thwack and fitted it into my bin. My eyes, trained to see patterns, saw the anomaly, the roll of new liners. It had a barcode sticker on the cardboard tube. It wasn't our standard V&V supply code. It was HS47. Haven Sanitation. My blood went colder than the AC. This man, this new janitor, was part of it. He was here to collect the shredded evidence. He was the 2:03 a.m. ghost, running his route early. I had to say something. Keep him here. You worked the night shift long?" My voice was strained. He finished tucking the bag, his back still to me. He started to push the cart away. Squeak. He stopped. He turned his head just slightly, the brim of the cap still hiding his face. His voice was a low rasp, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Long enough." He paused, and the silence stretched. The hiss thump of the air conditioner filled the void. "Long enough," he repeated, softer this time, "to see good people buried." The words hit me like a physical blow. It was a code, a warning, a confirmation. He turned to push the cart. His glove, worn and damp, snagged on the metal handle of the mop wringer, and I saw it. It happened fast. A flash of dull gold. A small, heavy object fell from his loose glove. It hit the polished terrazzo floor with a sharp, distinct ping that echoed in the vast, empty room. It rolled, a perfect, wobbling circle of gold. It spun twice and settled, face up, right by the toe of my shoe. It was a signet ring, heavy, old world. Engraved on its flat gold face was a raven, wings spread, inside a quartered shield. The Q, the crest of the Quinn family. My family. I stared at the ring, my entire world tilting. There was only one person who wore that ring. A ring I hadn't seen in over a year. A ring that was supposed to be resting on a bedside table in a retirement home in Florida. My breath hitched. My gaze lifted from the ring to his hand, now bare. It was chapped, red, the knuckles swollen. Not the hands of a retired billionaire. They were the hands of a worker. My eyes traveled up the gray uniform, to the face hidden in shadow under the cap. I could see only his mouth, thin and set, and his eyes, blue-gray, sharp as broken ice, and utterly unmistakable. They were staring at me with a raw, desperate intensity. A single word escaped my lips, a whisper that held the weight of my entire life. "Grandpa?" He moved like a snake. In 1 second, he was on me. His calloused hand clamped over my mouth, not hard, but with an undeniable, silencing force. The smell of ammonia and old leather filled my nostrils. His other hand, the one that had been hidden, shot out. A single finger pressed to his own lips in a universal, frantic shh. His eyes, my grandfather's eyes, darted wildly, not at me, but up, to the corner of the ceiling, where a small black dome hung. The camera, its tiny red indicator light was a single, burning ember in the dark. He leaned in so close his whisper was nothing but a vibration against my ear. "Don't trust anyone here," he rasped, the voice rough, terrified, and full of a command I hadn't heard since I was a child. Not even the lights. He released me. In one fluid motion, he snatched the ring from the floor, jammed it back onto his finger, shoving his glove on over it. Then he was gone. He didn't walk. He moved, pushing the cart, which seemed to glide silently now. He disappeared around the corner. A moment later, the motion sensor above my desk timed out. Click. I was plunged back into darkness, lit only by the green numbers on my screen. 10:43 p.m. I was alone again, but the air was no longer sterile. The silence was screaming. My grandfather, Beckett Quinn, the founder of this entire company, the man rumored to be senile and dying, was disguised as a janitor. And he was wiping up bloodstains outside my office. I sat in the pitch black for a full 5 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The motion sensor finally gave up on me, plunging my desk into the same shadows that had swallowed my grandfather. 10:48 p.m. The air, still vibrating with his warning, "Don't trust the lights," felt thick, toxic. My family built this city, or at least its skyline. My grandfather, Beckett Quinn, was a Grayford legend. He was the man who'd started with a single, rusted-out tugboat and a desk in a shipping container on the Raven docks, back when it was all mud, diesel fumes, and corrupt union bosses. He'd fought them all, the politicians, the weather, the competition, and built Varon and Vale Logistics from the sludge up. He was a creature of grit and salt, a man who famously signed his first $1 million contract on the back of a napkin with a pen he'd borrowed from a waitress. Then, 2 years ago, he'd retired. The official story was health concerns, a desire to pass the torch while the flame still burned bright. As the press release put it, he handed the CEO title to my father. His only son, Beckett, the builder, retreated to Florida, and my father, the maintainer, took the helm. My father. He was a good man. He loved the business, the hum of the trucks, the logic of the supply chains, but he lacked the cold, hard instinct that had made Beckett a shark. Dad was a philosopher, not a fighter. He believed in handshakes and trusting people, a philosophy that got him killed. His death, 1 year ago, was sudden, a massive, unexpected coronary event. He was 54. He was found in his office, Sloane's office, now, by Sloane herself. Sloane, my stepmother, his second wife, 20 years his junior, a former corporate lawyer he'd met at a conference and fallen for. Hard, while I was numb, trying to navigate the funeral and the suffocating scent of lilies. Sloane was navigating the boardroom. She moved with breathtaking speed. She produced documents, invoked bylaws, and charmed the board. She was poised, grieving, and utterly in control, with my father's signature barely cold on a revised succession addendum, and with Beckett Quinn mysteriously incommunicado in Florida. The board ratified her as interim COO. Interim lasted 3 weeks. She stepped into the power vacuum with a bright, reassuring smile and a phalanx of the city's most ruthless attorneys. And me? I was shuffled sideways. I had my father's mind for numbers, but none of his charm, and none of Beckett's iron. I was given the data investigation team on the 47th floor. It was a promotion in title and a demotion in influence. I was safely quarantined in a room full of servers, where I couldn't do any damage, Sloane herself had patted my arm at the announcement. "You're so practical, Mara," she'd said, loud enough for the other VPs to hear. "So focused. It's a gift. You don't have the burden of politics." I was the practical one, the quiet daughter, the one with no political talent. I was the reliable, unthreatening cog in her new, gleaming machine. The machine was beautiful. From the outside, the Quinn family remained a pillar of Grayford. We were perfect. Sloane ensured it. She chaired the Children's Hospital Charity Ball. She gave speeches about sustainable logistics and corporate responsibility. The Grayford Gazette ran a glowing profile just last month, hailing her as a progressive female leader redefining a legacy industry. The article featured a photo of her cutting a ribbon, smiling, her teeth white and perfect. Beside her, in an inset, was a grainy old photo of Beckett, covered in mud, squinting at the camera. The headline, "From Grit to Grace." While Sloane was collecting accolades, Beckett Quinn had evaporated. After my father's funeral, where he'd looked frail and hollowed out, he'd vanished from public life. The corporate communications team handled all inquiries. "Mr. Quinn is in frail health," the statements read, "and has been profoundly affected by his son's passing." The whispers that slithered out of the legal department were different. Senile, lost his grip, incapacitated, a tragedy. Really, Sloane is managing his care. He was a non-person, a ghost in a Florida mansion, until tonight, until he showed up in my office in a janitor's uniform, picking through my trash for intel. My dig hadn't started with the numbers. It had started with a piece of paper. 6 weeks ago, I'd come home to my sterile apartment, one of the perks of being a V&V executive, a high-rise condo in the company's glass and steel portfolio, slipped under my door. Sitting starkly on the white marble floor was a plain manila envelope, no name, no address. Inside, a single, cream-colored index card. On it, 4 words in old-fashioned, blocky type, the ink slightly uneven, as if from a manual typewriter. "Check Raven Docks, Wednesday, 2:03 a.m. Raven Docks, my grandfather's starting point, and 2:03 a.m., the signature. That note is what sent me into the facility's management logs. It's what made me find Haven Sanitation. It was a breadcrumb, and I'd followed it, not knowing who had dropped it. Now I knew. I ran a hand over my desk, my fingers tracing the smooth, cold surface. My other hand instinctively went to my wrist, to the heavy cuff of silver I always wore. It was a gift from Sloane. She'd given it to me about a month after she'd taken over, calling me into her new, minimalist office. "Mara, darling," she'd said, sliding a sleek black box across the chrome desk. "A little something, to thank you for being so steady through all this, and it will go so well with your simple work dresses." The silver cuff was beautiful, stark, modern, expensive. It was also sharp, not decorative sharp, but blade sharp. The minimalist, clean-cut edge was honed to a razor's thinness. I'd cut my thumb on it just trying it on. "Oh, careful," she'd said, her eyes bright with something that wasn't concern. "It has an edge, like you. Mara, deep down." I wore it every day, a reminder. I learned to be quiet. I learned to survive on the 47th floor. I learned to listen. I could tell by the whump, whump, whump of the industrial shredder on the 48th floor what was being destroyed. Old vendor contracts had a lower, heavier rhythm. Personnel files were a high, quick whine. I learned to count the beats of the air conditioning system. A 4-beat hiss, a 2-beat thump, to keep my voice even when I was forced to present my practical data in meetings. I learned to watch the reflections in the floor-to-ceiling glass, to see who was watching me, who looked away when I looked up. They called this floor Catalyst. The name was etched in 10-foot-high letters on the glass wall of the lobby, where data ignites innovation. The corporate slogan read, "What a bitter joke. This floor wasn't a catalyst. It was a filter. It was the building's liver. It was where everything was processed, scrubbed, and sterilized until it was safe for consumption. It was where bloodstains on the balance sheets were cleaned, where messy human impulses were rounded into clean, manageable data points, where a company that started in mud could pretend it was born from glass. And tonight, the man who'd brought the mud had returned. He was pushing a mop, his family signet hidden under a damp glove, and he had just shattered the sterile glass and steel illusion. He wasn't senile. He wasn't in Florida. He was here. He was hiding in plain sight, and he was terrified. The entire history of the Quinn family, the official, polished, PR-approved history, had just been rendered obsolete by a man in a baseball cap. And I was the only one who knew. I didn't move. I just sat, my skin prickling in the cold. Conditioned air. My entire reality recalibrated by the weight of a gold ring. The silence of the 47th floor was no longer empty. It was watchful. My grandfather, here. I forced my legs to move, my chair rolling back with a groan that sounded impossibly loud. I stood up, the motion sensor clicking on, blinding me for a second. Don't trust the lights. I had to find him. I walked, my footsteps echoing on the terrazzo, following the faint, lingering scent of ammonia. I bypassed the main elevators and pushed through the heavy steel door into the service corridor. The difference was immediate. The air was warmer here, thick with the smell of machinery, grease, and industrial cleaning agents. The walls were bare, painted concrete, and the only light came from humming, caged bulbs. In the distance, I heard the squeak thump of his cart. He was waiting by the freight elevator, his back to me, studying the control panel. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice raw. He didn't turn. "In here, now." He palmed a keycard, a gray, unmarked cleaner's pass, and swiped it against a panel I'd never noticed. A narrow, metal door flush with the wall popped open, revealing a dark utility closet. He pulled me inside and the door hissed shut, plunging us into near-total blackness, lit only by the tiny red and green LEDs of a server rack in the corner. The space was tight, smelling of bleach, damp mops, and ozone. "You shouldn't have followed me," he rasped, his voice all business. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my whisper shaking. "You're supposed to be in Florida. You're supposed to be sick." "I was," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Sick of being told I was senile. Sick of my nurses reporting my every word back to Sloan. I haven't been in Florida for 2 months. I've been employed by Haven Sanitation for 6 weeks." He'd faked his own mental decline, a long con, played from a gilded cage, until he could orchestrate his own transfer to a lower security facility, from which he'd simply walked away. He'd used his old network on the docks to get a new identity and a job scrubbing floors in the company he'd built. "You can't find a leak from the top, Mara," he said. "You have to be in the bilge, with the rats." He gestured to the opaque black bag he'd taken from my office, which was now tucked into his cart. "You were getting close, too close. Your shredded notes on the Haven contract. That was reckless, child. I had to swap your bin, protect you from your own curiosity." He reached into a separate compartment on his cart and pulled out a different bag, this one sealed with a zip tie and marked with the HS-47 code. "This is the real collection. I pulled this from the executive shredder bin on 48, just before the real Haven crew got to it. It's a draft of a new contract, a revision, with a forged digital signature, your father's." My blood ran cold. "She's using his credentials." "She's using his ghost," Beckett corrected, his voice hard. "And cleaning is the code name for the whole operation. It's not about the floors, Mara. It's a pipeline, a river of cash flowing out of V&V and into Haven's accounts. And in exchange?" He paused. "Uninspected, undocumented containers, rolling into Raven docks every Wednesday, 2:03 a.m. That's when the cargo manifests are digitally scrubbed from the Port Authority's servers. Money goes out. God knows what comes in." He turned to his mop. The simple wooden handle looked ancient. He gripped the black rubber end and twisted it. It came off with a soft pop. Inside, nestled in a cutout of dense gray foam, was a tiny, brushed metal USB drive. It was no bigger than my thumbnail. He pressed it into my palm. My skin was so cold. The metal felt hot. "This is 6 weeks of work," he said. "The real shipping logs from the docks, pulled before they could be scrubbed, discrepancies in weight displacement, server access logs from the 48th floor. It's a start. It's encrypted. Your birthday, month, day, year, 8 digits." "We have to go to the police," I whispered, clutching the drive. "Now." "No." His answer was immediate, sharp as a slap. "Absolutely not. You don't understand the board. You don't understand how she's positioned this. She has wrapped this so tight in legal and financial firewalls. Any outside investigation will be pointed straight at you." He jabbed a finger at my chest. "You, the lead data investigator, the one with access, the one finding anomalies. She'll paint you as a disgruntled, ambitious daughter trying to frame your grieving stepmother. She'll serve you up as the rogue employee. You'll be the one who gets cleaned. We do this our way, from the inside, and we do it in the right order." He was right. The cold, brutal logic of it settled on me. I was the perfect scapegoat. He began laying out the battle map, his voice low and rhythmic, as if dictating a pre-operation brief. "There are 3 primary blind spots in their surveillance net. They're not accidental. This technical elevator, it runs on a separate hydraulic system, and its camera feed loops the last 30 seconds if you use a maintenance key. The executive parking garage, by the south wall exit, the sensor is faulty, always has been, and the 12th floor deep archive, that's where they meet. That's where we'll move." He leaned closer, his icy eyes boring into mine. "You have to listen to me. Mara, Sloane's entire strategy is built on plausible deniability. She's brilliant. I'll give her that. She buries her crimes under mountains of clean documents." He ticked the points off on his gloved fingers. Internal audits that come back perfect. Glowing ESG, environmental, social, governance. Reports that win her awards. Flawless, itemized sanitation invoices. She's not just cooking the books. She's rewriting the entire cookbook. She's created a reality so clean, so sterile, that any accusation of filth seems insane. "So what do? We get dirty," he said. "We split the mission. Your job is to stay at your desk, go back to your terminal, be the practical daughter, be sentimental with your numbers. But in the background, you use that key. You work offline. You build the real financial model. I don't want a breadcrumb. Mara, I want the whole goddamn map. I want to see the real money. From the V&V account, through the shell banks, to the Haven invoice, to the 2:03 a.m. container. Show how it moves, second by second." "And you?" I asked, my voice barely a thread. "What's your job?" His lips pulled back in a grim smile. "My job is to plant a stain, a piece of physical evidence, something so dirty, so tangible, that all her clean reports and audits can't wipe it away. Something that links her, personally, to that 2:03 a.m. shipment. She thinks she's a ghost in the machine. I'm going to give her a body." A new dread surfaced. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough." His face darkened. "Sloane just called an extraordinary shareholders meeting. It's this Friday, 9 a.m. She's planning to consolidate her control. She's going to use my incapacity and your instability to push through a new bylaw. Seize full proxy control of the Quinn family shares, our shares, your father's shares, my shares. Whatever she's been planning, it all ends on Friday." He put his hand on the door. "Which means we have to move first." "How will I know when?" I whispered. My hand clenched so tightly around the USB drive, my nails dug into my palm. "When do we start?" He looked at me, his face a mask of iron and shadow. He held up his left hand, the one with the ring, the Quinn Raven. "You'll know," he said, his voice dropping to a final, deadly whisper. "When I drop this ring again, you don't hesitate, you don't second-guess, you don't wait for confirmation. You know it's time to start. You upload everything you found to the independent auditor's server. You make the calls. You burn the whole damn thing to the ground." He palmed the door, and it hissed open. He was gone. Just a man pushing a mop cart. The door clicked shut, sealing me back in the dark, the smell of bleach in my lungs and a declaration of war in my hand. The next morning, the summons came, not as an email, which would leave a record, but as a silent, insistent blink on my desk phone's display. Line 4801, COO's office. My stomach hollowed out. I took the USB drive my grandfather had given me, now copied and triple encrypted on a microdrive hidden in the sole of my shoe, and locked the original in my desk's physical safe. I smoothed my simple gray work dress, the one Sloane had mocked, and put on my practical daughter face. Sloane's office was on the 48th floor, a corner suite that felt less like an office and more like an observation deck for a predator. It was a perfect cube of glass, suspended over the city of Grayford. The furniture was all white leather and chrome, reflecting the relentless gray light. There were no photos, no plants, not a single personal item, unless you counted the single, perfect white orchid on her desk, which looked like it was carved from porcelain. The air didn't smell of coffee or paper. It smelled of an expensive, ozone-based air purifier. It was the scent of nothing. She was standing, not sitting, looking out at the rain-lashed city, a tablet in her hand. She was dressed in a sharp, winter-white suit. "Mara," she said, her voice soft, not turning. The word echoed slightly in the glass room. "Come in. Shut the door." I did, the heavy glass door clicking shut with a pressurized, final huff. The sound of the main office vanished. I was in the cube with her. The silence was absolute. She turned. Her smile was bright, precise, and had all the warmth of a shard of crystal. It was a smile that didn't just show teeth. It showed edges. "You look tired, darling," she said, gliding over. "Working too hard? Digging too much?" She held up the tablet. "You broke the balance sheet." On the screen was a logistics cost analysis report, my department's letterhead, my digital signature block at the bottom, and a sea of red annotations, highlighting numbers so catastrophically wrong, so wildly inflated. They didn't just suggest incompetence, they suggested intent. It showed a $5 million overallocation to fuel commodities, channeled through a vendor I'd never heard of. It showed projected maintenance costs for Raven docks that were doubled. It was a tapestry of fraud, and my name was at the bottom. I didn't sign this," I said. My voice was flat, but my heart was a cold stone. "This isn't my projection." "But it is your signature, Mara," she said, her voice still a sympathetic purr. She held the tablet closer to my face. "Your credentials, your workstation, at 11:03 p.m. Last night, while you were here. Working late? Tisk, tisk, so sloppy." I had been in the utility closet with my grandfather at 11:03 p.m. Someone had been at my desk, or, more likely, had routed the file from a remote terminal using my credentials. She was framing me, and she was showing me exactly how she would do it. This is a problem," she interrupted, her voice hardening just a fraction. "A big, messy, dirty problem, and you know how I feel about mess." She set the tablet on her desk and moved closer. I was standing directly in the center of the room. I could feel it. The small, black, unblinking eye of the security camera in the ceiling corner. I was on stage. Sloane stopped, standing so close I could smell the faint, sharp citrus of her perfume. She raised her left hand, the one that wore the silver bracelet, the one she'd given me. "You have a good, practical mind, Mara," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. "But you're still your father's daughter. You're sentimental. You're looking in all the wrong places. You're looking in the trash." Her hand came up. I flinched, bracing for a slap. But she was, as always, more subtle. She didn't hit me. She touched me. She laid her hand against my cheek, a parody of a comforting gesture. The silver bracelet was ice cold against my skin. "A woman," she whispered, her smile now a tight, cold line, "should know how to be clean." Then she dragged her hand, slowly, down. The honed edge of the silver cuff was a razor. It bit into the skin just below my cheekbone. It was a sharp, searing pain. thin as a paper cut, but deep. I gasped, a tiny, stolen breath. She pulled her hand away. "Oops," she said, looking at the tiny pinprick of blood welling up on my face. "Clumsy me." I stood there, frozen, the sting radiating across my cheek. I could feel the single drop of blood beginning to slide. She did it. She assaulted me, right here, in her office, directly under the unblinking eye of the camera. But she was smart, I knew, without even looking, where I was standing. She had positioned me perfectly. My back was to the window, the camera was in the ceiling, in front of me. She had stood between me and the camera, her body masking the action. The camera would have seen her touch my face. It would have registered a comforting, maternal gesture. It would not have seen the bracelet. It would not have seen the edge. It was a blind spot, a perfectly calculated, deliberate blind spot. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice laced with false concern. She tilted her head. Go back to your desk. Clean yourself up. And clean this up." She tapped the tablet with the faked report. "I want a clean, audited, correct balance sheet on my desk by end of day. The one that matches the numbers I sent you this morning. Understand?" I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, the movement pulling at the cut. "Good girl." I turned and walked out of the glass cube, the heavy door huffing shut behind me. I walked through the 48th floor executive wing, my hand pressed to my cheek, my blood hot on my fingers. I could feel the eyes of the executive assistants on me, their polite smiles barely concealing their curiosity. I was the bullied schoolgirl, sent from the principal's office, marked and shamed. I got back to the 47th floor. The air conditioning hit me, cold and metallic. My desk, my sanctuary, now felt like a cell. And then I saw it. Taped to the back of my ergonomic chair, a simple, yellow sticky note, the kind anyone could grab from the supply closet. On it, 4 words, typed, just like the note in my apartment, in that same old-fashioned, blocky font. But this wasn't from my grandfather. This was a mockery of his warning. 2:03 a.m., clean it up. It was a direct order, a threat. She was telling me to fix the numbers, to bury the Haven contract, to become complicit. She was using the time, my grandfather's time, against me. She was telling me she owned the clock. I sat down, my entire body shaking with a cold, repressed fury. I looked at the note. I looked at my screen. I felt the throb in my cheek. I logged into the system. My hands were steady on the keyboard. I pulled up the facilities management schedule. There it was, a new entry, logged just 5 minutes ago while I was in her office. Vendor, Haven Sanitation. Task, emergency spot cleaning. 47th floor data hub. Time, Wednesday, 2:03 a.m. They were coming for my office, for my data, for me. They weren't just running money, they were running an intimidation campaign. And Sloan was scheduling her cleaners to come at the exact same time as her ghost shipment. It was an act of supreme, arrogant confidence. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a personal device, not my corporate one. I pulled it out under the desk. A text from an unknown, encrypted number. "Don't stand in front of the glass." I frowned. What did that mean? I looked up, at the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that made up the outer wall of the 47th floor, showing the rain-swept city below. I stood up, as if to stretch. I walked toward the window, looking out, and in the reflection, I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it until I was 2 feet away. A faint, impossibly thin red line, sweeping across the glass at chest height. It was invisible to the naked eye unless you caught it at the perfect angle. A laser mic. Someone was reading the vibrations on the glass to listen to conversations inside the building, from an adjacent skyscraper. I stepped back, fast, my heart leaping into my throat. They weren't just watching me inside, they were listening from outside. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a notification from a simple, secure app I'd installed that morning, an app my grandfather had specified. It had one function. A single icon appeared on my screen. A simple gray outline of a broom. The signal. It's on. I'm moving. He was in position. He was starting his part of the plan. My fear evaporated, replaced by a sudden, icy calm. I sat back down at my desk. I took my hand away from my cheek. I looked at the small smear of my own blood on my fingertips. I pulled a clean yellow sticky note from the dispenser. I looked up at the camera in the corner. I knew its blind spots, too. I angled my body, shielding my hands with my shoulders. Carefully, deliberately, I pressed my bloody finger to the note, a perfect, crimson whirl. I let the blood bead and dry for a moment, then I pressed the note from Sloan, 2:03 a.m., clean it up, to my desk, and I placed my blood-stained note right beside it. With a black pen, I wrote two things below my bloody fingerprint. S. Office. 9:17 a.m. I angled my phone, my body still blocking the camera, and took a high-resolution, time-stamped photograph of the two notes, side by side, the threat and the proof of the assault, real-time evidence. Sloan wanted me to feel like a helpless, bullied child. She wanted me to be messy, then to clean up my own humiliation. She mistook my silence for weakness. She mistook my focus for fear. I turned back to my terminal, my face stinging, and opened a new, hidden partition. I plugged in my grandfather's drive. My calmness wasn't weakness. It wasn't submission. It was a blade, cased in ice, waiting patiently in my sleeve, and I was just beginning to sharpen it. The digital clock on my terminal flipped to 2:00 a.m., the numbers glowing stark and green in the oppressive silence of the 47th floor. The air was still, heavy, charged with the anticipation of the storm outside and the one we were about to unleash inside. I had spent the last 3 hours building my side of the map, a hidden, encrypted partition that now held a living, breathing model of Sloane's financial parasite. I stood, pulling the hood of a plain black rain jacket over my head. I left my terminal on, the faked, sloppy balance sheet still on the screen, a piece of digital bait. I didn't take the main elevator. I slipped back into the service corridor, the smell of bleach and old machinery welcoming me like an accomplice. I entered the technical elevator, the one with the 30-second camera loop. I used the maintenance key my grandfather had palmed me hours earlier, hidden inside a hollowed-out marker. The car didn't ding, it just groaned, a low metallic sigh, and began its descent, bypassing all floors. I watched the floor numbers count down, 40, 30, 20. As I passed the 12th floor archive, I saw him, through the narrow, wire mesh window of the elevator. I caught a parallel action. My grandfather, pushing his cart, exiting the 12th floor service stairs. We were in sync, two ghosts moving through the building's arteries, unseen, unheard, on a perfect timed collision course with the truth. The elevator shuddered to a halt in the sub-basement. Technical level B. This was below the parking garage, a world of massive, sweating pipes, humming transformers, and the constant thump of the building's central pumps. The rain was louder here, a deafening roar hammering on the concrete loading bays. I slipped out into the loading dock. A gust of wind hit me, carrying the smell of the city's underbelly, wet asphalt, diesel, and the faint, briny tang of the Grayford River. He was waiting for me, standing by a battered white van. Not his cleaning cart. This was transport. "No words," he rasped, climbing into the driver's side. I got in. The van was old, smelling of damp upholstery and metal. He drove without lights, gliding through the labyrinth of the service tunnels until we emerged onto the street, 3 blocks away from the V&V Tower. The city was empty, washed clean by the 2:00 a.m. downpour. We drove to the one place in Grayford that never slept, Raven Docks. This was his kingdom, the mud and sludge he'd built an empire on. It was a different world from the 47th floor. Here, the air was heavy with the smell of salt, rust, and diesel. massive gantry cranes, silhouetted against the bruised, churning sky, moved with a slow, monstrous grace. The rain lashed against the windshield, the wipers beating a frantic, rhythmic pulse. We didn't go to the main V&V gate, manned by security. He drove to a side entrance. Gate 4, Sanitation and Supply, a single, rusted chain-link fence, monitored by a single camera and a modern, high-tech access panel. He didn't slow. He pulled the van up, leaned out the window into the driving rain, and swiped a card. A privileged access sanitation pass. I saw the name on the card, lit for a second by the panel's green light. T. Grady, retired. The gate beeped. A heavy magnetic lock clicked, but it didn't open. A blue light flooded the cab. Facial recognition required. My blood froze. This was new. This wasn't in the plan. "Don't move," my grandfather ordered. He leaned his head out the window. The blue light scanned him. He was wearing his baseball cap, pulled impossibly low. The rain was streaming off the brim, creating a waterfall that obscured the upper half of his face. He was just a chin, a mouth, and a whole lot of shadow. He held his breath. The light swept back and forth. The system was thinking. It was comparing this partial, rain-soaked image to the file photo of T. Grady, a man who'd retired 3 years ago. Beep! The light turned green. A synthesized voice cut through the rain. "Welcome, Mr. Grady." The gate slid open with a metallic shriek. "The system is trained to fill in the blanks," he said, his voice tight as he drove through. "It sees the hat, the uniform, the card, and it wants to see the right face. It's lazy. Sloan is counting on it." He parked us in the shadow of a mountain of shipping containers. The V&V logo, the Quinn Raven, stamped on their corrugated sides. We got out. The sound was deafening, the rumble of a massive freight hauler, the clang of metal on metal, the constant hiss of the rain. "There," he pointed. Under the harsh sodium-orange floodlights, Container 17B was rolling slowly on an automated track, moving toward a loading bay. It was isolated, away from the main cargo. The electronic manifest on the side of the track read, "Contents: recycled medical equipment, non-Haz. Origin: Sino-Caribbean imports. Dest: V&V Archive, 12B. Recycled medical equipment," I muttered. "The perfect lie. No one wants to look inside." "No one but us," he said. He had his cart. He must have stashed it here earlier. He pushed it out of the shadows, his movements casual. Just another janitor on his rounds. He moved toward the loading bay, where 2 men in black V&V logistics jackets were waiting, their backs to us. He unlatched a false panel in the bottom of his mop bucket. Inside, a small, military-grade mini-camera, its lens no bigger than a pin. He set it to record, his hand steady. He wasn't filming the container. He was filming the feet of the men as they approached the control panel, their expensive non-regulation boots. He was gathering the stain. This was my cue. I split off, melting into the shadows, heading for the dock's small, dilapidated break room. The door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled of stale coffee and damp work clothes. A single, flickering fluorescent light illuminated a row of vending machines. One of them, a soda machine, had an out-of-order sign taped to it. I knelt beside it, just as he'd described. Behind the rattling ventilation grill at the base, there was a plate, and behind the plate, a shielded USB 3.0 port, hardwired into the dock's internal server, a maintenance backdoor he'd installed himself decades ago. I plugged in my laptop and the encrypted drive. I didn't need to hack the system. I was in the system. My screen lit up. The partition I'd built came to life. My financial model sucking in the live. 2:03 a.m. Data. It was horrifyingly beautiful. The money moved like a shoal of fish. I watched the transaction that Haven Sanitation was invoicing for right now. The V&V payment, the sanitation fee, didn't go to Haven. It went to a shell bank in the Caymans. From there, it split, hopping to a holding company in Delaware, before reforming and landing in the account of a V&V-owned Green Future Fund. Sloan's award-winning Press Darling ESG initiative. She was using the company's Clean Environmental Fund as her personal piggy bank to pay for the dirty shipment. She was financing the undocumented cargo with the very money meant to prove our corporate responsibility. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One word: drop. It was time. I looked through the grimy break room window, across the yard, maybe 50 yards away. I saw him. He was standing near the control booth, where the two men in black were now talking to a third, a supervisor. I saw my grandfather, the janitor, accidentally bump his cart against a railing. I saw the glint of gold. He let the signet ring fall. It hit the wet, oil-stained concrete with a tiny, sharp ping that I couldn't hear, but I could see. The signal was given. I started my count. 1. The men in the booth were arguing. The supervisor was pointing at the container. 2. I had my own program ready, the maintenance channel, the diagnostic loop. 3. My grandfather bent down, agonizingly slow, as if his back was bad, to retrieve his ring. 4. My finger hovered over the enter key. 5. I hit it. I wasn't hacking the comms, I was requesting them. My system sent a high-priority audio integrity test signal to the control booth's hot mic, and the system, recognizing my credentials, obliged. A live audio feed began streaming to my laptop, recording directly. At first, just static and rain. Then, the supervisor's voice, tinny and panicked. Don't care what the manifest says. The weight is off by... And then, a new voice, a voice that cut through the static, the rain, and my own blood. A voice that was not physically at the docks, but was patched in, godlike, from the 48th floor. Sloan. You will stick to the protocol, she said, her voice crisp, cold, and utterly unmistakable. The manifest is the reality, now, about the other problem, the girl. A pause. My breath caught in my throat. I don't care what it takes. Sloane's voice snapped, echoing in my headphones and on my hard drive. Make sure she signs the confirmation before 7 a.m. I want her signature on that file before the market opens. Do you understand me? I want her fingerprints all over that transfer. I hit stop record. The file saved, encrypted, and duplicated itself to an off-site server in less than a second. We had it. We had her. The link, the voice, the command, the order to frame me, tied by a timestamp to the 2:03 a.m. shipment. I looked back out the window. The rain was letting up, just slightly. My grandfather had his ring. He was pushing his cart, melting back into the shadows. He looked toward the break room, a single, dark shape in the orange light. He couldn't see me, but I saw him. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, we just had to wait for the sun to come up and for the shark to find the blood. I was back on the 47th floor by 3:12 a.m. The rain had subsided to a miserable, cold drizzle. My jacket was soaked, but my hands were steady. The encrypted audio file from Raven Docs was now part of a growing arsenal, safe on the micro drive in my shoe. I had Sloane's voice. I had the 2:03 a.m. shipment. I had the money map. It felt like the end game, but a good data investigator never trusts the first clean-cut conclusion. The system is a body, and a single symptom rarely means a simple disease. I sat at my terminal, the green glow of the faked balance sheet, a mockery of the truth. I had to bundle the evidence, to build the case file that would detonate in the boardroom on Friday. I started pulling the server logs, not just from finance, but from security, to create a perfect time-stamped narrative. Here is the audio of Sloane giving the order. Here is the log of the Raven Docs gate opening. Here is the log of her green future fund dispersing the payment. And that's when I saw him, or it. A user account I had never seen before, Janus Root. My fingers froze on the keyboard. A root account is a system god. It has no restrictions. It can walk anywhere, see anything, delete anything. And this one had privileges that made no sense. It was flagged for access to both the accounting mainframe and the V&V corporate security servers. Finance and security, the money and the cameras, the two pillars of Sloane's power. No IT admin would have this. No single executive. This was a custom-built key to the entire kingdom. This was the account of a ghost who could not only watch the theft, but watch the watchers. My heart, which had finally settled, began a new, cold, heavy beat. I ran a network trace. The account wasn't logging in from a remote IP. It wasn't bouncing from a server in another country. It was internal. The signal was coming from inside the tower. IP address 10.481.12. Floor 48, the executive floor, but not Sloane's port, not the COO's office. I pulled up the building's network schematic, my hands flying. Port 1048.112. The data line terminated in the corner office, the office of the Chief Legal Counsel. Harold Dane. The name hit me like a physical blow. Not Harold, not Uncle Harry. He was my grandfather's oldest friend, his confidant, his right hand since the mud and diesel days of the 80s. Harold was the one who'd taken me to my first baseball game. He was the executor of my father's original will. He was family. In a way Sloane could never be. The memory, a black and white clip in my mind, replayed itself with sudden, sickening clarity. The day my father died, the hospital, the suffocating, sterile smell. I was outside the ICU, my knuckles raw from banging on the locked door. "Please," I'd begged the nurse. "I just need to see him." "Mrs. Quinn has requested privacy," the nurse said, her face a mask of professional pity. I'd looked down the hall, through the reinforced glass of a family waiting room, and I saw her, Sloane, in a perfectly tailored black dress, her face a mask of poised, acceptable grief. She wasn't alone. Harold Dane was sitting beside her. He wasn't crying. He was reviewing a stack of documents. He had a pen in his hand. He'd looked up, met my eyes through the glass, and his gaze was not one of comfort. It was an assessment. Then, as I watched, he'd turned back to the papers. He'd clicked his pen, and he'd signed. He was the one who'd notarized her power. He was the witness who'd signed off on the revised succession addendum, the very one that had locked me out. He was attesting to my father's sound mind on the same day my father's heart had exploded. Janus, the two-faced god. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with a rage so cold it burned. This wasn't Sloane's operation. This was a partnership. I had to be sure. I had to see the digital ghost move. I opened the fraudulent Haven Sanitation contract file, the one Sloane wanted me to clean. I navigated deep into the itemized billing, to a line item so obscure it had to be part of the padding. Aqueous biosolvent, hazard grade. The fraudulent entry was $22,108.40. My finger hovered over the key. I changed the 8 to a 3, a $5 difference, a typo, a rounding error that any normal accountant would miss or ignore. I saved the file. Then I opened a hidden protocol sniffer, aimed directly at that file's directory. I watched. The clock on my screen read 3:24 a.m. I waited. Ping. 3:26 a.m. Janus root logged in. The IP trace confirmed. 1048.1.12. Harold's office. He was here, now, in the middle of the night. The file was accessed. My log watcher went crazy. The file was opened. The value was edited. The file was saved. The entire operation took less than 4 seconds. I refreshed the contract. The line item was back to $22,108.40. He wasn't just a partner. He was the enforcer. He was the obsessive, meticulous watchdog, cleaning up any anomaly, any loose thread, even a $5 one. He was watching my every move. He wasn't just Sloane's lawyer. He was her system administrator. I pulled out my secure phone. My fingers were stiff. I messaged my grandfather. 3 words. Janus is Harold. The reply was almost instant, but the pause before it came felt like an hour. Harold pulled me from a dock fire in '87. Saved my life. I always knew he was a better lawyer than he was a friend. This is painful, but it is necessary. Burn him. Burn him. The order was absolute. The pain in his words was a new kind of fuel. Harold wasn't just a traitor, he was a Judas, betraying a 40-year friendship for, what? Power? Money? Fine. Harold wanted to be the watchdog. I would give him something to guard. I began to build a new trap. A trap not for Sloane, but for her two-faced god. I created a new directory. I titled it, Final Friday Audit Vimara. Inside it, I created a new balance sheet. But this one was a work of art. It was perfectly, spotlessly clean. I stripped out every fraudulent Haven contract. I corrected the Raven Docks overallocation. I rerouted the Green Future Fund money back to its intended accounts. I created a pristine, honest, practical set of books, the kind of file my father would have been proud of. It was bait. To Harold, to Janus, this file wasn't just a correction, it was a bomb. It was a direct contradiction to the entire fraudulent narrative he was protecting. He couldn't ignore it. His obsessive, controlling nature wouldn't let him. He would have to access it. He would have to fix it, to change my clean numbers back to Sloane's dirty ones. He would see it as him cleaning up my mess, but it would be his confession. I embedded a trigger, not in the file, but in the server directory itself. The moment the Janus root account accessed that specific file and, this was the key, saved a change, the system would fire. No alarm, nothing so crude. It would quietly compile a package. First, the server log, time-stamped, showing Janus root, IP 10.48.1.12, accessing and altering the file. Second, a full before and after snapshot of the data, showing my clean numbers being actively overwritten with his fraudulent ones. Third, the 2:03 a.m. audio file of Sloane from Raven Docks, implicating her in the shipment and the frame-up. And fourth, the assault. I went into the 48th floor security archives. I pulled the video from Sloane's office, 9:17 a.m. As I expected, it was useless on its own. It showed her, back to the camera, standing too close, her hand on my face, a comforting gesture. But I paired it. I digitally appended my own high-resolution time-stamped photo, taken at 9:19 a.m. in my own office, the angry red scratch on my cheek, next to Sloane's yellow sticky note, 2:03 a.m., clean it up. The video of the gesture, paired with the photo of the wound, became a story. The macro would bundle this entire digital case file, Harold's edit, Sloane's voice, Sloane's threat, and Sloane's violence into a single, encrypted packet. And it would send it to the third-floor maintenance hub, to the dot matrix printer, an ancient, forgotten machine that hadn't been serviced in a decade, but was still, miraculously, on the network. It would print a hard copy, a physical, unhackable, undeletable stack of paper, chronicling their entire conspiracy, from the physical violence in the glass tower to the digital fraud in the servers. I saved the clean file. I leaned back in my chair. The sterile, clean file was now live. It sat there, glowing on the server, a perfect mirror waiting for a vampire. All I had to do was wait for the obsessive, meticulous hand of Harold Dane to reach out and fix it. He would, in an attempt to wipe away my work, leave his own fingerprints, indelible and damning, all over the evidence. Friday, 9:00 a.m., the Harbor Boardroom. It was the most coveted room in the V&V Tower, a marvel of engineering on the 49th floor. It was cantilevered out from the building's side, a sheer box of floor-to-ceiling, triple-paned glass. It was designed to make the executives inside feel as if they were floating, godlike, above the city. Today, it was a fishbowl. Beyond the glass, in the main lobby, the press and the secondary shareholders were gathered. They couldn't hear us, not yet, but they could see everything. They were a restless, silent audience, sharks drawn by the blood in the water, the extraordinary shareholders' meeting Sloane had called on less than 48 hours' notice. The board was seated, 12 men and women, smelling of expensive leather and quiet money, their faces composed. Sloane stood at the head of the massive, obsidian table, a vision in cobalt blue. She was the picture of control. Beside her, looking calm and professorial, was Harold Dane, his legal pads stacked neatly. A single janitor, old and unassuming in his gray uniform, quietly refilled the water glasses. No one gave him a second look. Sloane smiled, a bright, confident flash of white. "Good morning," she began, her voice resonating with warmth and command. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice. I called this meeting because, in a time of transition, clarity is paramount. Varon and Vale is, and will remain, a pillar of this community. Our operations are secure, our financials are sound, and our future is, more than anything, sustainable, clean, and transparent." I waited. She'd used the magic word. Clean. I stood up. My chair made a scraping sound on the polished floor. 12 heads turned. Sloane's smile faltered. Just a fraction. "Sloane," I said, my voice clear and cold, carrying across the silent room. "You're right. We should talk about being clean." I walked to the head of the table and placed a single, unmarked black USB drive on the obsidian surface. "Mara," Harold Dane interjected, his voice a smooth, paternal reprimand. "You are out of order. This is not on the agenda." "It is now," I said. I looked at the board, at the faces I'd known my whole life, men and women who had eaten at my father's table. "My name is Mara Quinn. I am the lead data investigator for this company, and for the last 3 days, I have been analyzing precisely how we clean our money." Sloane's expression hardened. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, dangerous stillness. "Mara, sit down. If you have some departmental concerns, you can schedule time with my assistant." "I have concerns for the entire company," I said, plugging the drive into the table's central port. The 80-inch monitor behind Sloane flickered to life. "I'm sure you'll find this illuminating." The first image appeared, a grainy, low-light video. Timestamp, 02:03 a.m. Location, Raven Docks. "This is the 2:03 a.m. shipment," I narrated, my voice flat, a simple presentation of data. "The one paid for by the Haven sanitation invoice, the one you all approved in the last facilities budget." The video was from a low angle. It showed non-regulation boots. It showed container 17B. It showed 2 men in V&V jackets, their faces turned away, arguing with a supervisor. The board leaned in. This was irregular. This was dirty. "What is the meaning of this, Sloane?" one of the older board members, a man named Bisset, asked. "This is unvetted footage," Sloane said, her voice like ice. "It's meaningless." "It's not," I said. "Watch." On the screen, a new figure entered the frame, a janitor, pushing his cart. He accidentally bumps it. He stoops, agonizingly slow, and the camera zooms. It zooms in on his hand, the worn glove, and the glint of gold as he fumbles for something he dropped. It zooms in on the ring, the Quinn Raven. A collective, sharp intake of breath in the room. Bisset, who had known my grandfather for 50 years, squinted. "My God, is that—" "Yes," a new voice said. It was a low, rough rasp, and it came from the back of the room. The janitor, the one who had been pouring water, stepped forward into the light. He placed the coffee carafe on the table with a heavy, deliberate thud. He pulled the baseball cap from his head, his gray hair matted with sweat. He peeled off the damp work gloves, one by one, and he held up his left hand, where the heavy gold signet ring now sat. "Don't," Beckett Quinn said, his voice raw. "Talk about clean when your hands are still wet." The room exploded. "Beckett! What is this? It's a trick. He's supposed to be in Florida. He's—" Sloane's face was a mask of chalky white, but the real performance was Harold Dane. He shot to his feet, his chair screeching back, his legal pads scattered. "Beckett!" he stammered, his face slick with a sudden, terrified sweat. Beckett, what? What are you doing? You can't be here. You're unwell. I'm perfectly fine. Harold, my grandfather said, his icy eyes locking on his oldest friend. But you look sick. My turn, I said, clicking to the next slide. The screen changed. It was a server log, a cascade of green text. While my grandfather was getting his hands dirty at the docks, I said, I was watching the clean hands, right here in the tower, at 3:26 a.m. To be precise, I found a god-level account, Janus Root, an account with access to both finance and security, an account that, for the last year, has been meticulously altering records to hide the Haven pipeline. I pointed to the top line. The account's IP address is 10.48.1.12, the office of our chief legal counsel, Harold Dane. Harold looked like he'd been shot. This is fabrication, a digital smear. She faked it. Did I? I clicked again. I set a trap. Harold, I created a perfectly clean balance sheet. I corrected all your fraudulent numbers. I left it on the server. And you, obsessive as you are, couldn't let it be. You took the bait. This log. I highlighted the code. Is the system record of Janus Root accessing my clean file, and manually, line by line, changing the numbers back to the fraudulent ones. You weren't cleaning up my mess. Harold, you were planting your own confession. He was the hand, I said, but Sloan was the voice. I clicked again, this time, just an audio file. I hit play. Sloane's voice, crisp, cold, and unmistakable, filled the silent room. I don't care what it takes. Make sure she signs the confirmation before 7 a.m. I want her signature on that file. I want her fingerprints all over that transfer. The color drained from the board members' faces. Sloane, for the first time, looked small. She gripped the edge of the obsidian table, her knuckles white. And this, I said, is what happens when you get in her way. I played the final file. First, the security footage from Sloane's office. 9:17 a.m., her back to the camera, her hand on my face. This is Sloane comforting me, I narrated. After finding a fraudulent report she had planted on my terminal, Sloane let out a small, contemptuous scoff. See? A comforting gesture. She's delusional. But the camera, I said, has a blind spot, which is why I took this. 1 minute later, at my desk. I clicked, the screen split. On the left, the comforting gesture. On the right, my high-resolution time-stamped photo. The angry, red, razor-thin scratch on my cheek, side by side with her threatening note. 2:03 a.m. Clean it up. This, I said, my voice shaking but full of ice, is what her comfort looks like. This is what her clean looks like. I tied it all together. The 2:03 a.m. invoice, the 2:03 a.m. audio, the 2:03 a.m. threat, the 2:03 a.m. shipment. She wasn't just stealing from you, I said to the board. She was building a weapon to frame me. Her partner was covering her tracks, and she was using the company's Green Future Fund to pay for the entire filthy operation. Silence. The glass walls of the harbor room felt like they were shrinking. Outside, the press and shareholders were on their feet, their faces pressed against the glass. They couldn't hear the words, but they could see the evidence. They saw the logs. They saw the picture of my face. They saw Beckett Quinn, alive and furious. And they saw the reaction. Bisset, the old board member, slowly, deliberately, picked up his leather-bound notebook and his glass of water, and he moved his chair, scraping it loudly on the floor, 2 feet away from Sloane. Then another board member did, and another, a silent, physical shunning. They were moving away from the infection. Sloane looked at Harold, her eyes flashing with pure venom. Harold had collapsed into his chair, his face buried in his hands. The partnership was broken. I turned back to the board. My presentation was over. I had been the practical daughter. Now, I would be the practical surgeon. Sloane's operation, I said, my voice low and final, is a tumor. It has grown in the dark, fed by our trust, and hidden by our own clean reputation. It's wrapped around the spine of this company. I looked at Sloane. Her eyes met mine. They were no longer cold. They were burning. The diagnosis is simple, I said to the room. We either cut out this tumor, right here, right now, or we let it eat the entire body. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and cold. The board members stared, not at me, but at the empty seats on either side of Sloane. They had created a physical void around her. Then she laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was a brittle, sharp, ugly sound, like glass breaking under pressure. "Oh, Mara," she sneered, her composure snapping back into place, a mask of pure, condescending contempt. "You really are your father's daughter. So much drama, so much sentiment. You think this community theater means anything?" She turned her gaze on my grandfather. "And you, Beckett, this is pathetic, even for you. A janitor's uniform? You have no power here. You are a legal nonentity. You invalidly transferred your voting shares to my late husband in a state of documented cognitive decline. You have been legally declared unfit to manage your own affairs." Harold Dane, seeing his opening, scrambled to his feet. His gray face was slick, but his lawyer's instincts took over. He grabbed his briefcase, snapping it open on the table. "She is correct," he announced, his voice shaking but regaining its old condescending authority. "I have the documentation right here, a fully executed special power of attorney, granting Ms. Quinn oversight of Beckett's care. It is signed by 2 board-certified neurologists. He lacks the legal capacity to sign a lunch receipt, let alone attend a board meeting." He fanned the papers out. "He is legally and medically confused. This entire display is inadmissible. It's the desperate fantasy of a confused old man and his overly emotional granddaughter." My grandfather had not moved. He simply watched Harold, his face a mask of disappointment. Then he moved. He walked to the head of the table. He didn't look at Sloane or Harold. He looked at the board, the men and women who had built their fortunes on his. "Harold's right," Beckett said, his voice quiet. "I am confused. I was confused for 40 years about who my friends were." He took his left hand, the one with the ring, and placed it on the obsidian table. The sound was a sharp click. "This ring," he said, "was given to the first Quinn to come to this country. It's a symbol of who we are." He looked at Harold. "You always thought it was just old-world nonsense, didn't you, Harry?" Sloane scoffed. "We don't have time for family anecdotes. Beckett, security!" But no one moved. All eyes were on the ring. My grandfather pressed his thumb against the eye of the engraved raven. It was not a carving, it was a latch. With a sound so faint it was almost lost. The flat gold face of the signet ring popped open on a micro-hinge. It was not a crest, it was a cover. Inside, nestled in a tiny machined cavity, was not a family jewel, but a slim, dark chip. The Quinns have always believed in blending tradition with modern solutions, my grandfather said. He took a simple, nondescript smartphone from his pocket. He laid it on the table. Then, he tapped the open ring, chip side down, against the phone's screen. A beep sounded from the main 80-inch monitor, which I still controlled. The screen, which had been frozen on the picture of my assaulted face, flickered. A new file directory opened. V&V Trust Protocols. Janus Directive Addendum 04B. "What is this?" Sloane demanded. "This," my grandfather said, "is my son's last will and testament." A video file opened and began to play. The date in the corner was 1 day before my father died. He was in his office. He looked exhausted. He looked terrified. But his eyes were lucid and burning with a cold, clear anger. A certified video notary's watermark pulsed in the corner of the frame. "I, Robert Quinn," my father said, his voice clear and strong, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby invoke the Janus Protocol, Section 4B, of the Quinn Family Trust, effective immediately. Harold Dane's face went from gray to the color of ash. No, that's a dead clause. It's a theoretical. It's not theoretical, Harry, my father's voice said from the screen, as if answering him from the grave. I have reason to believe that a significant ethical and criminal breach is being orchestrated by a non-blood member of this board, using my own credentials and name. Sloane was white-knuckling the table. My father continued. The Janus Protocol states that in the event of a direct, verifiable ethical challenge, such as the one my daughter, Mara Quinn, is currently investigating, my entire voting block, and the primary family shares held in trust for me by my father, Beckett Quinn, are to be consolidated. Full and temporary proxy power for all Quinn family shares is to be transferred, immediately and exclusively, to Mara. This is a sham, Sloane shrieked, finally losing her mask. It's fake. It's not notarized. It's not legal. On the contrary, Ms. Quinn, a man at the far end of the table, a man in a simple suit whom everyone had mistaken for a junior legal aid, stood up. My name is Elias Vance, he said, his voice calm and precise. I am an independent corporate counsel, retained by Mr. Beckett Quinn 2 months ago. The video notarization is state-of-the-art and ironclad, executed by a certified e-notary and filed with the state bar. 1 hour before Mr. Robert Quinn's death, it is fully, irrevocably legal. Harold, the lawyer, saw one last out. He lunged, his voice desperate. It's invalid. The Janus Protocol. I wrote it, you fool. It requires a secondary biometric authentication to be executed by the proxy within 24 hours of the clause being invoked. It's a security measure. Without her fingerprint, digitally and legally matched to the trust's biometric file, the proxy fails. It's void. He smiled, a terrible, desperate rictus. It's impossible. We never took her print. My grandfather just looked at me. His eyes were sad. Mara, the pen I gave you, for your masters. My hand flew to my briefcase, the pen, the heavy, polished silver pen. For signing big deals, Mara, never let them see you shake. I pulled it out. Mr. Vance, the independent lawyer, spoke again. The graduation pen was, in fact, a high-resolution biometric scanner. Mr. Dane, it recorded Ms. Quinn's full thumbprint at the moment she accepted it. That print file was immediately encrypted, certified, and sealed in the V&V corporate vault, Section 1A, to be opened only by one key. My grandfather held up his ring, the ring that contained the chip. The key, he said. He tapped the ring to his phone again. The 80-inch screen changed, a black screen, with a single, pulsing icon. Janus Protocol, awaiting biometric authentication. It's locked to the vault's database, Mr. Vance explained. The vault is, of course, on the building's internal network. This phone is now the terminal. Ms. Quinn, if you would. This was it, the click moment. I walked to the head of the table. I walked past the ashen-faced Harold. I walked past Sloane, who looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost visible. I reached out my hand. I placed my thumb on the sensor of my grandfather's simple black phone. For a second, there was only silence, the sound of the air conditioning, the distant, muted sound of the press, shouting outside the glass. Then, a sound, not from the phone. It was a loud, electronic click that echoed from the speakers in the ceiling, the sound of a digital deadbolt, a vault, an entire system, unlocking. The screen flashed. Authentication. Valid proxy. M. Quinn voting shares. Quinn Trust. 68% transfer. Complete. 68%. My father's shares, my grandfather's, my own. It was a supermajority. It was control. The room was mine. I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table. I looked at the board members, who were now staring at me, not with pity or curiosity, but with a new, raw calculation. "There is a resolution on the floor," I said. My voice did not shake. "I move for an immediate vote on 2 items. Item 1. The immediate and indefinite suspension of COO Sloan Quinn and Chief Legal Counsel Harold Dane, pending the results of a full, independent, forensic investigation into the matters presented today. Item 2. To grant said independent investigators full, unrestricted access to all V&V servers, accounts, properties, and personnel, effective immediately." I looked at Bisset, the oldest board member, the one who had moved his chair first. "I call the vote." Bisset found his voice. It was a low rumble. "A vote has been called. All in favor of the resolution as stated by Ms. Quinn?" My hand went up. My grandfather's hand went up. Bisset's hand went up. One by one, like a wave, every other hand at the table went up. It was unanimous. "All opposed?" Bisset asked. A formality. Sloan and Harold were statues, defeated. Bisset raised his heavy, ringed hand, and he slammed it down on the obsidian table. The bang was as final as a judge's gavel. "The resolution passes. The majority is absolute." The slam of Bisset's hand on the table echoed, a single, sharp bang that severed the past from the present. The vote was done. The 68% majority was absolute. Sloan stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief that was slowly cracking to reveal the raw, furious panic beneath. Harold Dane had collapsed into his chair, a puppet with its strings cut, his hands limp on the table. No alarms rang, no sirens wailed. The heavy glass door to the harbor boardroom hissed open. 2 men entered. They were not police. They were the V&V Tower's elite security detail, the internal executive team, and they wore simple, dark suits. But they were not looking at Sloan with deference. They were looking at Mr. Vance, the independent counsel, who gave a single, curt nod. The men moved with a practiced, fluid silence. They walked around the table, one to Sloan, one to Harold. They did not produce handcuffs. They did not read him his rights. This was a corporate execution, not a legal one. That would come later. The first guard stopped just behind Sloan's left shoulder. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pair of immaculate, folded white cotton gloves. He slowly, deliberately, began to put them on. Sloan watched the movement, transfixed. The man, having smoothed the glove over his right hand, gently, almost politely, placed that gloved hand on her shoulder. It was not a violent grip. It was a simple placement, an ending, a sterile touch to remove a contaminated object. At the same moment, Harold Dane's body convulsed. He fumbled, grabbing for his phone, his lifeline. He jammed his thumb onto the screen, trying to call. Who? His broker? His offshore bank? Another lawyer? It didn't matter. The phone in his hand buzzed, a frantic, useless vibration against the obsidian table. The screen was black, save for a single, small icon, a broken network link. "As of 9:14 a.m., I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic buzzing. "All network privileges for accounts Quinn and H. Dane have been revoked. The Janus Protocol was not just about voting rights. Harold, it was about system integrity. You've been unplugged." His hand kept jabbing at the dead screen, a reflex of a man who no longer had any power to connect. I turned back to the 80-inch monitor. The board was watching me, waiting. My grandfather stood by the wall, his arms crossed. "There is one last file," I said. "This one wasn't for the vote. This was for the record." I clicked the final icon. The screen changed. The slick, corporate graphics vanished, replaced by a dark, grainy, and visceral image. It was the footage from the mini-camera, the one my grandfather had hidden in the base of his mop cart. The timestamp read 02:03 a.m. It was a low-angle shot, chaotic, wet. It showed the rain-slicked concrete of Raven Docks. It showed the heavy, non-regulation boots of Sloan's men. It showed the massive, groaning wheel of Container 17B as it rolled past, inches from the lens. It was the physical proof, the stain he had promised to plant. It was the mud and the grit and the salt of the docks, brought right into the sterile, glass and steel heart of the 49th floor. The board members, who dealt in abstracts, in numbers and projections, were now forced to watch the tangible reality of the crime, the dirt, the rain, the sheer physical weight of the smuggling operation. I watched Sloane. She was not watching the screen. She was staring at her own left hand, which was resting on the table. She was staring at the heavy, modern, razor-edged silver bracelet, the gift she had given me, the weapon she had used to mark me. She looked at the screen, at the footage of the dirty, wet docks. Then she looked back at her bracelet, the symbol of her clean, sharp-edged power. She understood. She finally understood that the dirt had won. Her right hand moved. She fumbled with the clasp. It took her a moment. Her hands, which had signed million-dollar contracts, were shaking. She got it open. She pulled the silver cuff from her wrist. She held it for a moment, a piece of obsolete armor. Then, with a gesture of final, weary disgust, she dropped it onto the table. The heavy silver hit the obsidian. It didn't just land. The honed, sharp edge bit into the polished surface, and as it settled, it carved a single, white, ugly scratch into the perfect black mirror of the boardroom table. A permanent, messy, indelible mark, her final signature. My grandfather moved. He walked past me, to the service credenza against the wall. He ignored the crystal pitchers and the silver coffee urns. He picked up a simple cardboard box of disposable cleaning wipes. He walked back and slid the box across the table. It stopped right in front of me, next to the ugly white scratch. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. "You clean it, Mara," he said, his voice quiet, but it carried the weight of the entire company. I understood. I was not cleaning up her mess, as she had ordered me to do in my office. I was erasing her. I pulled a single, damp white cloth from the box. I placed my hand on the table, and slowly, deliberately, I wiped the scratch. I wiped away the mark of the bracelet. I wiped away the last physical trace of her power. The motion was slow, steady, and circular, like I was auditing a balance sheet, reconciling a final dirty number back to zero. When I was done, the table was clean. The scratch was gone. Mr. Vance, the independent counsel, walked to the glass doors that led to the lobby. He looked at the security men. The guard's gloved hand tightened on Sloane's shoulder. "We're ready," Vance said. He pressed the button. The massive glass doors to the harbor boardroom hissed, unlatched, and slid open. The sound hit us like a wave, a wall of noise, the frantic, shouting questions of the press, the roar of 100 voices, the blinding, percussive flash of dozens of cameras, turning our private execution into a public spectacle. The fishbowl had shattered. "Ms. Quinn, what is the meaning of this? Is Beckett Quinn alive? Sloane, what's happening?" "Mr. Vance placed a stack of papers in front of me. "Ms. Quinn, the authorization for the third-party auditors to unseal the data and begin the forensic investigation." I picked up a simple pen, not my graduation pen, just a pen. I signed my name, Mara Quinn, the signature she had tried to forge, the one she had wanted on the fraudulent transfer. It was now the key that unlocked everything. "Release it all," I said. "All of it, no exceptions." The guards moved. "Ms. Quinn, Mr. Dane, this way, please." They began the walk, the long, silent walk out of the room, past the board, and toward the open doors, where the blinding wall of light and sound was waiting for them. My grandfather watched them go. Then, he picked up his discarded baseball cap from the floor. He settled it on his head, pulling the brim low. He was a janitor again. His work was done. He reached out and tapped his signet ring. The Quinn Raven, one last time on the obsidian table. It made a single, sharp, final tin, a period at the end of a long, dark story. I didn't watch Sloane walk out. I didn't need to see her face as the cameras hit her. I didn't need to hear Harold's pathetic muttering. I had wiped the table clean. I turned my back to them, and I faced the open doors. I faced the lights. The story, the real one, had just been told. The wall of sound from the lobby hit me first. A physical force of shouting and strobe lights. Sloane and Harold were just dark silhouettes, momentarily blinded, as the two white-gloved security guards guided them firmly into the storm. They were the contamination, being expelled. A reporter from the Gazette, a woman I recognized, shoved a microphone past the threshold of the glass door. "Mara, Ms. Quinn, you control the company. What is your message to the shareholders?" I stood in the doorway, the glass box that had been Sloane's fortress now just a room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. This company will be clean, for real. The flashes erupted, a violent, percussive wave of light in the fractured strobing. My eyes caught a detail. Beyond the chaos of the press, further down the 49th floor corridor, a real janitor was pushing his cart. He was an older man, one I'd never seen before, and he was whistling softly. His cleaning cloths were stark white. His trash bags were the standard, translucent V&V issue, and he wasn't swapping them. He was just cleaning. The building was already healing. I turned back from the doorway. My grandfather was gone. He hadn't waited for the applause. He hadn't waited for the questions. I caught a final glimpse of him, just a gray uniform, as he stepped into the service elevator. The one that smelled of grease and hydraulics. The heavy doors slid shut, sealing him in with the faint, honest scent of soap and the memory of the rain. He had vanished back into the building's veins, anonymous once more. His war was over. I walked back to the massive, obsidian table. It was empty, save for the single, ugly scratch Sloane's bracelet had left, and the Quinn signet ring. My grandfather had left it. It sat in the very center of the table, a heavy, dull gold sentinel on a field of black. The engraved raven was facing the open doors, its wings spread, as if standing guard. It was no longer a secret key. It was a statement. My corporate phone buzzed on my hip, a system-generated email. The suspension orders for Sloane Quinn and Harold Dane were now active, their network access, their keycards, their digital and physical presence, all revoked. Their ghosts were exorcised from the machine. Far below, I knew. The silent, white-gloved escort was guiding two powerless people through the main lobby. Their fall was quiet. The only noise was the press, feeding on the carcass of the old regime. I left the 49th floor boardroom. I left the glass box, the scratch, and the ring. I took the stairs, not the elevator, down to the 47th. My floor, my desk. The air still hummed. The motion sensor lights clicked on, one by one. A familiar, sterile escort. I sat in my ergonomic chair. For the first time, I turned my back to the massive, floor-to-ceiling glass, no longer afraid of the view or what might be listening from the other side. I opened a new email. To all staff at Varon Vale, subject, an open audit. I typed one sentence. Effective immediately, a full independent audit of all accounts, contracts, and security logs is underway. There will be no exceptions. My finger hit the enter key. The hiss thump of the industrial air conditioning continued its steady, 4-beat rhythm. The same sound as yesterday, the same sound as last night, but the room felt different. The sterile, pressurized, suffocating silence was gone. The air felt lighter. It felt as if someone, somewhere high in the sealed, glass and steel tower, had finally, impossibly, opened a window. I looked at my monitor, the blank new email window glowing back at me. There were no more numbers to chase, no more shadows to dig through, no more promises to make. The work was done. I reached out and pressed the power button on the monitor. The green glow vanished, plunging my desk into the soft, ambient light of the floor. I stood up. As I slung my jacket over my shoulder, a final, quiet ping sounded from my desktop speaker, a system notification, a ghost in the machine confirmation, appearing on the black screen for just a moment before it, too, faded. Ethics resolution vote, 9:14 a.m. Approved, logged. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please drop a comment below to share your thoughts, subscribe, and like the video. And if you enjoyed this, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.